we're going to move on to the next thing. So Trump is going to be banning the Department of Education. So this is a great thing because for those of you that don't know, the Department of Education is trash. It's just awful. So recently Trump has gone on to say that he'd be getting rid of the Department of Education, and he said that he wanted to bring powers back to the states, and he even said that he wants individualized education as it should be. Everyone knows that education isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. What one group of people might need is going to be different from what others need. So I think leaving it to the states is a good thing. It's actually the constitutional thing, actually. The Department of Education is actually unconstitutional. Completely unconstitutional. The District of Education, or the Department of Education, I thought I was saying something wrong there. The Department of Education was founded in 1973, or 1979. So, for those of you who don't know, 1979 was the same year that the three-point line was added to the NBA. So we have this department that the government spends like $70 million on or so every single year. That's been around for the same amount of time as the three-point line in the NBA. And it's showed little results. Little results have come from the Department of Education. For the last 45 years, it's been a complete waste of like $7 million every single year because it's completely useless. The Department of Education has nothing to do with schools. Like, very little. I'd even go as far as to say if Trump were to ban the Department of Education and just didn't tell anybody about it, just banned it and got rid of it, no one would even notice. I would go as far and say that. Because it doesn't do much. They don't really do anything. It's not like if the Department of Education gets shut down that all schools are going to get shut down along with it. Okay, which I already know, I already see this coming. This is going to be a left-wing thing that people are going to say. From now on, people are going to say that he's trying to take away our education from our kids. He's trying to make our kids dumb, which is not the case. And the left is going to try to use this as a fear-mongering tactic to get people to vote against Trump. Also, I mentioned earlier that it's completely unconstitutional. Now, I know that nobody cares about things being unconstitutional because our Constitution is just a piece of paper. And as we've learned, if something's written on a piece of paper, no one cares about it. The department has also harmed the education system, in my opinion. Academic performance of students since the Department of Education has actually gone down. So since it's been implemented, it's actually gone down. The Washington Examiner actually pushes this point even more. This is a quote from one of their articles saying, this is an article, by the way, talking about the education scores, for a little context. This tells us something important. Funding is not what determines educational outcomes. This has been known since at least the 1990s. So according to this article, we've known since the 1990s that just because a school has more funding does not mean that it's going to have better results. So if a school gets $100 billion, it does not mean that school is going to be the best school in the nation. That's what that study is showing. When the review of 400 studies on the subject found that there was not a lot of strong or consistent relationship between students' performance at schools, or between students' performance and school resources. So just because a school doesn't have a lot of resources doesn't mean that the kids are going to turn out dumb. For example, I went to a very low funded school. In my high school, I went to a private school in high school, and the funding wasn't the best. However, the education was pretty good. Still, we had some liberal garbage in there, like climate change and stuff like that. But besides that, like, it was a good education. It was definitely better than the public school education that's here, which is funded so much so they're literally spending like $10 million on a new sports thing. But anyway, I digress. Not important. We can also look at this is once again from the article. We can also look at the states from. We can also look at the state of some of our most well-funded districts in this country, which as Baltimore City Schools, which depend more, or which spends more than $21,000 per student, or Chicago Public Schools, which spend almost $30,000 per student. And in each of those districts, there were at least a dozen of schools where not a single student tested proficient in either math or reading. So, the Department of Education, and now that's not completely just the Department of Education, that's just talking about monetizing schools in general, but that just goes to show that the Department of Education isn't really necessary. Now, before this gets brought up, because I already know it is, there is an education chart from the 1970s. It talks about the scores since the 1970s. And the chart shows that from the 1970s, it goes down till about 1978. So it goes down. It's going down like this till 1978. And then it starts going up. And most people are going to relate this to the Department of Education being implemented. But that's not the case. Okay? Because the chart is talking about mathematics. And for those of you who know history, during the 70s, like mid-70s, is when calculators started becoming more prominent in schools. That's when people started using calculators more. So it's very reasonable to suggest that the calculators and calculators being more predominant in schools is actually what caused the education scores to go up. Because obviously a tool that will literally give you a pinpoint accurate answer to a question, and you can ask it any question you want, of course that's going to help the education scores go up. That just makes sense. The reason why the Department of Education doesn't help is if you look at the reading scores. Reading, by the way, which is something that you can't just plug into a calculator. You have to actually do it. Stayed about the same. And then in 2012 had a big boost. And then it has a huge dip around the 2020s. There's a huge dip after 2012. And then an even bigger dip after 2020. Now, the big dips on both scales after the 2020s could be because of COVID. They definitely are because of COVID. Because we unnecessarily left kids home for COVID purposes, even though the statistics showed that that actually made it worse. The spreading of COVID actually got worse when people were staying home with their families. Because the idea was that if you stay home with your families quarantined, you're not going to spread COVID out and around. But actually what ended up happening is that you stayed enclosed with somebody with COVID. And then you probably caught COVID afterwards. and you can't always tell with COVID. And then you went out after the person tested positive for it. So actually the shutdowns actually made it worse. So that's terrible what they did with the kids there. Plus, like, the whole the quarantine ruined the education system as it is. But it does not stop the fact that the DOE is completely useless, and it's a great thing that Trump is going to shut it down, because it's going to help us from being able to lower our taxes. It's going to push us in the direction of us lowering our taxes and us being able to lower taxes, because $70 million is not going to be going to some garbage. I'm not even sure if it's $70 million. Probably more than that. Thank you for watching all the way through the end. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, you can tune into my full show to watch all of my episodes early. And as always, God bless.